Hey there, and welcome back to the channel. This is the place where we talk about building long-term wealth the smart way, and we truly believe that health is your first wealth, so alongside every money conversation, you will always see us touching on living a healthy lifestyle too, because none of this matters if you are not around to enjoy it or pass it on. Quick note before we get started, you do not need to subscribe to this channel unless you actually feel like you got real value out of this video.
If that ends up being the case by the time we wrap up, we would love to have you stick around. But no pressure, let us just get into it. Here's a sobering thought to kick things off. By the time most people hit 65, only about 1 in 100 are actually well off financially. And here's the part that stings even more. Roughly 70% of wealthy families lose their wealth by the second generation, and around 90% lose it all by the third. So even if you build a real fortune in your lifetime, statistics say there's a good chance your kids or your grandkids end up losing it. By the end of this video, you will not only understand what it actually takes to build generational wealth, but you will walk away with a real game plan you can pass down to your own kids. Let us get into it. 1. Buy land. To really understand generational wealth, you first have to understand the difference between personal wealth and family wealth. Say you have $100,000 sitting in your checking account. That is personal wealth. It is liquid, it is easy to spend, and honestly, easy to blow through on things that don't matter. Family wealth works differently. It tends to be illiquid, meaning it takes real effort to turn back into spreadable cash. And that friction is actually a feature, not a bug, because it makes it much harder to carelessly spend away. Land is one of the purest forms of family wealth there is, simply because there's a fixed amount of it on the planet. As the population keeps growing, right here in the US and everywhere else, the demand for land only goes up, whether that's farmland in the Midwest or a clod outside a growing city in the Sun Belt. Buy land, hold on to it, and pass it down. And later in this list, we'll show you exactly how to tap into that value without ever having to sell it. 2. Buy cash-flowing property. If land is the foundation, cash-flowing property is what actually puts food on the table generation after generation. We're talking about apartment rentals, small commercial buildings, or even a modest hotel property. The kind of real estate that pays you every single month, as long as you hold on to it and there is demand. If you have ever played Monopoly, you already understand the concept. Buy, hold, and collect rent. Realistic recipe for building generational wealth with this. Buy at least 2 rental properties over the course of your life, and once your kids are adults, teach them to do the exact same thing. It will not make anyone a millionaire overnight, but within just a couple of generations, assuming the family avoids major financial setbacks like an uninsured medical crisis, you would end up with a real portfolio of passive income that keeps paying out for decades. People will always need a place to live, businesses will always need a storefront, and travelers will always need a place to stay. 3. Build an evergreen business. Most businesses do not last. You might be crushing it on social media right now, but chances are your grandkids will not be living off the residuals from your videos. An evergreen business is different. It made money in the past, it makes money today, and it will keep making money long after you are gone. Here's something that might blow your mind. A lot of the biggest brand names in the world are simply someone's last name. Boeing, Hilton, Ford, Chevrolet, Disney, Harley-Davidson, Kellogg, Mattel, McDonald's, all of these started as one family's business and became so enduring that the family name became the brand itself. Almost every product you touch in a store started as somebody's idea, structured well enough to survive decades, sometimes over a century. So here's a question worth sitting with. What would your last name sound like as a brand? And what kind of business could you start today that your kids could genuinely carry forward long after you are gone? 4. Buy the S&P 500. You've probably heard the stories. If only you would put money into Apple or Bitcoin back in the early days, you would be sitting on a fortune today. The problem is, none of us are reliably smart enough to pick the next Apple ahead of time, no matter how confident anyone sounds online. That's exactly why the S&P 500 is such a powerful tool for the average American family. It bundles roughly the 500 best-performing, publicly traded companies in the US into a single investment. And if one of those companies underperforms, it simply gets replaced with a stronger one. Since its introduction, the S&P 500 has historically returned an average of around 6 to 10% a year, depending on the time period you measure, and it has outperformed even legendary investors like Warren Buffett over the last decade or more. A consistent, disciplined investment in a fund tracking the S&P 500
through a provider like Vanguard or Fidelity, held for decades rather than months, is one of the simplest, most repeatable ways for a regular American family to build serious long-term wealth without needing to predict the next big winner. 5. Buy, borrow, die. This might be the single most valuable concept in this entire video, so stick with us here. Whether or not your family builds lasting generational wealth really comes down to 3 things: what you buy, what you do with it, and what happens to it when you pass away. Step 1. Buy things that hold or appreciate in value over time, like the land, property, and stock we already talked about. Step 2, and this is the part most people miss. When you need cash, you do not sell the asset. You borrow against it instead. Say you own a rental property and need money for something. Instead of selling it, you take out a loan against it. Since borrowed money is not considered taxable income, you get access to cash without triggering a tax bill. And as long as you are disciplined about using that money to buy more income-generating assets rather than blowing it on liabilities, you can repeat this cycle indefinitely while your credit and your asset base both keep growing. Step 3 is the part nobody loves talking about: death. But it matters, because in the US, inheritance and estate taxes can take a meaningful bite out of what gets passed down, depending on the size of the estate and where you live. Understanding how to legally structure your assets ahead of time is a huge part of making sure this wealth actually survives the transition to the next generation. 6. Buy and hold Bitcoin. Roughly once every couple of decades, a real technological shift comes along, and the people willing to understand it early and put a small portion of their portfolio behind it often end up seeing outsized rewards. To be clear, nobody is suggesting you sell your house and go all in on crypto. That would be reckless. But allocating a small, responsible amount, something you could genuinely afford to lose, into an asset like Bitcoin, especially on behalf of your kids, is a bet some families are choosing to make. The thinking here is that with inflation running hot and currencies losing purchasing power over time, having some exposure to a scarce, portable, digitally native asset provides a kind of diversification that traditional assets simply cannot offer. As with any volatile asset, this comes with real risk, and it is worth treating as a small, speculative slice of a much broader, more traditional wealth strategy, not the foundation of one. 7. Buy and hold gold, silver, and gemstones. Precious metals and gemstones are not exactly cutting edge as far as investments go, but there is a reason they have survived as a store of value for thousands of years. Think about the jewelry that gets passed down in families, generation after generation. It is not just sentimental. Historically, it served a very practical purpose. In an emergency, a family could sell or pawn a piece of jewelry rather than going into debt. Gold and silver are portable, universally recognized, and have historically held their value through economic downturns, even if their long-term growth potential is far more modest compared to stocks or real estate. It is not necessarily the most exciting way to build wealth, but as one small piece of a broader diversified family strategy, it has earned its place in the conversation. 8. Buy and hold art and collectibles. There is real value in things that people desire, and that desire holds up over time, art being a great example. A guitar that once belonged to a famous musician is worth vastly more than an identical guitar with no history attached, simply because of the story behind it. That is what is sometimes called intangible value. If your goal is multi-generational wealth, it is worth thinking about which assets will still be genuinely desired decades from now. Trendy sneakers or the latest collectible drop might hold value for a few years, but fine art, as an asset class, has actually outperformed the S&P 500 over multi-decade stretches historically, though it has traditionally required significant capital and insider access to participate in. The core lesson here: timeless demand tends to age far better than short-term hype. 9. Never stop earning and minimize taxes legally. No matter how much passive income your investments generate, you and your children should never fully stop earning, because there is real value, financially and personally, in continuing to build, create, and contribute. Beyond that, it is worth learning at least the basics of how money and taxes actually work, or at minimum, working with a great accountant who can translate it for you. Structuring your finances through a properly formed business and deducting legitimate business expenses is one of the simplest ways families reduce their tax burden year over year, all completely legally. The goal is never to cheat the system. It is simply to understand it well enough that you are never paying more than what is legally required. 10. Perpetually compound wealth and knowledge. Wealth and knowledge grow together. The more you understand, the more connections you can make, and the better decisions you tend to make with your money as a result. This is a big part of why financially successful people tend to be such consistent readers. There is genuine practical value hidden inside good books, whether it is about investing, parenting, or simply living a more intentional life. As Einstein reportedly put it, compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. Those who understand it earn it, and those who do not end up paying it. The real skill is learning to redirect your earnings into vehicles that keep compounding, rather than letting money sit idle, or worse, leak out through unnecessary spending. The goal for both your wealth and your knowledge is to never really stop compounding either one. 11. Marry well. This one might be a little uncomfortable to hear, but who you marry and who your children marry genuinely matters when it comes to protecting generational wealth. A divorce without a prenuptial agreement can cut a family's wealth in half almost overnight, and that risk does not disappear once you pass wealth down to your kids. If one of them goes through an unprotected divorce, a significant chunk of what you built can disappear along with it. This is part of why prenups have become far more common and far more accepted across the US in recent years, especially among younger generations. If there is even a little uncertainty, a prenup is a reasonable, practical step, and for your children's inheritance specifically, placing it inside a trust rather than handing it over outright adds another meaningful layer of protection. 12. Mentor your kids to take over or build bigger than you did. Only around 30% of family businesses actually make it to the second generation, and a big part of the reason is that many kids simply do not want to build a career living in a parent's shadow. Here's a tough but important truth. If your children do not start off with more advantages than you had, in some way, the parenting side of the equation likely fell short somewhere along the line, intentionally or not. Every parent wants their kids to have a better shot at life, but food, shelter, and financial support are really just the bare minimum. The bigger role is being a genuine mentor, someone who equips their children with real tools, real values, and real guidance, so they are inspired to build on what you started, rather than simply coast on it. 13. Set up a trust. If you want your wealth genuinely protected over time, trusts are one of the most effective legal tools available. A trust is a separate legal entity that holds and distributes wealth according to conditions you set, which helps ensure your children do not simply blow through everything you work to build. Trusts can also often be taxed at more favorable rates compared to a direct inheritance, and you have real flexibility in how they are structured. Funds can be released gradually, tied to milestones like finishing college or reaching a certain age. Because a trust is its own legal entity, it continues to exist after you pass away, which also makes it a smart legal way to reduce the impact of estate and inheritance taxes on what gets passed down. 14. Follow the 4% rule. Here is one of those principles wealthy families quietly live by. And now you know it too. If your wealth is growing at somewhere between 6 and 10% a year, a smart rule of thumb is to only withdraw about half of that growth each year. Say you have $1 million growing at 10% annually. That is $100,000 in growth. Instead of pulling out the full amount, you withdraw around $40,000 and let the remaining $60,000 stay invested and keep compounding. Stick to this one principle consistently, spend less than you earn, and let the rest keep growing, and it becomes very difficult to ever end up financially broke again. Wealthy families do not spend their principal. They spend a modest, sustainable portion of the interest it generates. 15. Write a will. This might be the most important item on the entire list, simply because it is the one thing every single person on earth will eventually need. Here is a perspective worth sitting with. If you pass away around 85 years old, your own children will likely already be in their 50s or 60s, with their financial lives largely figured out already. Which means, in a very real sense, your will is not really for your kids, it is for your grandkids. Your true legacy comes down to how well you instill the right values in your children, so that they in turn pass down wealth responsibly to the next generation as well. A clear, detailed, properly drafted will makes the transfer of assets far less likely to be challenged or contested, and ensures the people you actually care about are the ones taken care of. Bonus: raising kids around wealth. Here is a thought worth sitting with as we wrap up. Ideally, you want your children to have enough financial support to pursue any path they choose in life, but not so much that they lose all motivation to build something of their own. Plenty of people have crossed paths with a third-generation trust fund kid who never had to work a day in their life, and it rarely leads anywhere fulfilling. As a parent, the real goal is to open as many doors as possible for your children, while leaving the choice of whether to walk through them entirely up to them. Families who take this seriously often go out of their way to actively mentor the next generation, not just financially, but in terms of values and mindset too, which is a big part of why certain families manage to stay wealthy for centuries, while most others lose it all within a generation or two. Summary. At the end of the day, generational wealth is not really about one big lucky break. It's about a repeatable system, buying appreciating assets like land, property, and stock, borrowing against them wisely instead of selling, protecting that wealth through tools like trusts, prenups, and a properly written will, and just as importantly, raising children who understand the value of hard work, discipline, and continued learning, rather than simply inheriting money with no context for how it was built. The families who manage to keep their wealth for generations are rarely the luckiest ones. They are simply the ones with an actual plan, one that gets taught and reinforced, generation after generation. That wraps up today's video. We really hope this gave you a clear, practical roadmap for thinking beyond your own lifetime and toward building something that actually lasts for your family. If you found value in this one, feel free to stick around and subscribe for more videos like this, and we would genuinely love to know. Would you rather your kids and grandkids inherit the fruits of your hard work directly, or build their own path from scratch? Let us know in the comments. We always enjoy reading through them. Thanks so much for spending this time with us. Take care, and we will see you in the next one.